Hey there, what's up? My name is Chiranjeevi and I am a software engineer at Kony. Welcome to my design pattern video tutorial series part 3. And if you have not watched my existing two videos on design patterns, I will definitely recommend you to go and watch those videos. Moving on. In this video, we'll be discussing the advantage of factory pattern over the simple factory we discussed in the part 1. And we are going to take a look at how to remove the hard-coded dependency of the instantiation of the subclass of the factory and abstract it out in a properties file so that we could change the behavior of our program at runtime. And moving towards the end, we'll also discuss some scenarios which will give you a brief idea on how you can identify that you need this pattern. So let's get started. So let's discuss the use case where you should use the simple factory and the factory pattern. The simple factory, which we discussed in the first video, should be used when the class you're creating does not have a lot of dependencies, which means that your product class is not very complex and you're sure that it will definitely not change for a long time. If you are following the single responsibility principle, then the class you will be writing will be sufficient as long as it has only one reason to change. Well, you should always try to write classes which obey single responsibility principle. On the other hand, we have the factory pattern. This pattern encapsulates the object creation as well as abstracts it out from the place where it is being used. So, you should use this pattern when you don't know before what object should be created and you actually want to depend on runtime for the object creation. So, whenever you feel that you have a set of classes out of which are of the same category and one of them will be instantiated but you don't know which one, and the inputs you will be getting from the runtime of the project will be the one deciding this for you. Instead of actually writing code to handle all the special cases separately, you should definitely consider implementing this pattern. Alright, now we will go through a small code exercise and refactor our existing code such that we don't have to instantiate the subclass of the factory manually in the code. We'll be reading a configuration from the properties file and make the instantiation dynamic. This will also make the use case of this pattern more clear to you, so let's quickly dive into coding. Now let's quickly create a properties file from where we'll be reading the type of the factory we'll be instantiating. So we'll name our properties file app.properties. Let's name the factory petstore.factory.type and let's specify the fully qualified class name for the factory we are going to instantiate. So here we are. Now since we have configured the properties file, let's quickly go ahead in our petstore class and let's instantiate the factory from the properties file. Before loading the properties file, let's define the key which we will be using to instantiate the factory object and the location of the property file. So now we have defined these two variables. Let's quickly go ahead and instantiate our properties file. Here, I'm creating a separate method which will load the properties file from the path we have specified. Let's quickly create a file reader object and load our properties object with the reader. Also, let's load the class by its specified name in the properties file and return the instance of the factory. Also, if the factory instantiation fails, let's throw an exception saying factory could not be instantiated. So now let's quickly go ahead and run our program and let us see whether everything is working perfectly or not. So as you can see, our program is working fine and our dog object is created without hard coding the injection of the factory in the program. So let's quickly go ahead and try to understand what is happening here. So here we have configured the factory which we need in the properties file, whose name is petstore factory, and in the petstore class we are actually loading that factory class from the properties file itself. So to do that, we are instantiating a file reader object which takes the location of the properties file, and then we are instantiating a properties object by injecting the reader. After that, we are creating the class which we have specified in the properties file using the class.forName method and returning the instance of the factory which we require. Also, if the factory is not found, we are throwing an illegal argument exception with a message that factory with provided name could not be instantiated. So the benefit of this method is that you don't need to recompile your Java program to change the factory which is going to be instantiated. All you have to do is to change the factory you require in the properties file, and the program will behave differently each time. So in this video you learn the difference between the simple factory and the factory pattern, and how to use the factory pattern using the properties file method. And I hope you have understood that in which scenarios you should actually consider using the factory pattern. If you have any doubts or queries, let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer that. If this video was useful to you, don't forget to hit the like button and also comment and subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one with the abstract factory.